Story 1. The Uninvited Passenger, Elias. A quiet and introspective software engineer in his late 20s, had always been fascinated by the concept of astral projection. He'd devoured books, articles, and online forums, meticulously studying techniques to separate his consciousness from his physical body. His small, meticulously organized apartment in a bustling city was his sanctuary, a place where he could experiment with these esoteric practices in peace. He saw it as the ultimate form of escapism, a way to explore realms beyond the mundane. After months of dedicated practice, often falling asleep with guided meditations playing softly, he finally achieved it. The sensation was exhilarating, a profound lightness as he floated above his own sleeping form, tethered by a shimmering silver cord. His first few excursions were tentative, exploring his apartment, then his building, marveling at the newfound freedom. He could pass through walls, observe his neighbors without their knowledge, and drift through the city streets, a silent, unseen observer. The world, usually so solid and confining, was now a playground of boundless possibilities. He felt a sense of liberation he'd never experienced in his waking life. He was careful, always returning to his body before dawn, a habit ingrained from countless warnings in the texts he'd read. The silver cord, they said, was his lifeline, and to sever it was to risk being lost forever. One night, driven by a surge of confidence, Elias decided to venture further. He drifted out of his apartment, through the city, and found himself drawn to an old, abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. It was a place steeped in local legends of suffering and despair, a magnet for urban explorers and thrill-seekers. In his physical form, he would never dare to enter, but as an astral traveler, he felt invincible. He glided through the crumbling walls, past rusted medical equipment and decaying patient records, a silent witness to the echoes of past torment. The air was thick with residual emotions, a chilling tapestry of fear, anger, and profound sadness. He felt a strange pull, a morbid curiosity urging him deeper into the asylum's darkest corners. As he explored a particularly desolate wing, a profound cold settled over him, a cold that seemed to penetrate his very essence. He saw it then, a shadow, not a physical shadow, but a deeper, more profound darkness that seemed to absorb all light, coalescing in the corner of a dilapidated padded cell. It was vaguely humanoid, but its form shimmered and shifted, like smoke in a breeze. It radiated an intense, suffocating despair, a hunger that made his astral form recoil. He tried to move away, but a strange, invisible force held him captive, drawing him closer to the malevolent entity. He felt a growing sense of dread, a primal fear that transcended his astral state. The shadow began to expand, its form growing larger, more defined, and as it did, Elias felt a terrifying suction, as if his very essence was being pulled towards it. He struggled, trying to sever the connection, to snap back into his body, but he was paralyzed. The silver cord, his lifeline, began to stretch, thinning to an almost invisible thread. He could feel the shadow reaching for it, a cold, unseen tendril attempting to grasp and sever his connection to the physical world. Panic, raw and absolute, seized him. He was trapped, a helpless spectator to his own impending doom. Just as the shadow's tendril seemed to brush against his silver cord, a sudden, violent jolt ripped through him. He was back in his body, gasping for air, drenched in a cold sweat. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of his apartment. He sat up, disoriented, the terrifying encounters still vivid in his mind. He tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a nightmare, a vivid hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the lingering cold in the room, the faint acrid smell of decay, and the profound sense of violation told him otherwise. He was no longer alone. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his bed, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, sent shivers down his spine. He felt a presence in the room, a cold, unseen weight that seemed to press down on him, making it difficult to breathe. He could almost feel an unseen gaze on him, a malevolent curiosity that had followed him back from the asylum. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, the lingering effects of a terrifying dream. But the fear was too real, too visceral. Days turned into weeks. Elias stopped practicing astral projection. He couldn't bring himself to even think about it, but the presence remained. He would wake up in the middle of the night to the sensation of being watched, a cold spot in his room, a faint whisper that seemed to echo from the corners of his mind. Objects would sometimes move, subtly, imperceptibly, a book falling from a shelf, a door creaking open when he knew he'd closed it. He started to see fleeting shadows in his peripheral vision, quick, dark blurs that vanished when he turned to look directly at them. He felt constantly drained, perpetually exhausted, as if something was siphoning his energy. One evening, as he was preparing dinner, he heard a faint, distorted whisper right behind him. "You invited me." He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. Nothing but the air was thick with a palpable cold, and the acrid smell of decay was overwhelming. He knew then that it wasn't just a lingering presence. It was something that had attached itself to him, an uninvited passenger from the astral plane. He tried everything, sage smudging, salt lines, even consulting with a local spiritualist who, after a single session, refused to see him again, her face pale with fear. The spiritualist's last words to him were chilling. "It's not just a spirit, dear. It's a fragment, a piece of something ancient and hungry, and it's feeding." Elias's life became a waking nightmare. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, constantly on edge, waiting for the next manifestation. The shadows grew bolder, sometimes lingering for a second longer, revealing a hint of a form, a gaunt, elongated figure with eyes that seemed to absorb all light. The whispers became clearer, more insistent, sometimes forming coherent sentences, taunting him, reminding him of his foolishness, of the door he had opened. He was a prisoner in his own home, haunted by an entity he had unwittingly brought back from the void. He eventually moved, desperate for a fresh start, hoping to leave the entity behind. But it followed him. It was a part of him now, a parasitic attachment that fed on his fear, growing stronger with each passing day. He learned to live with it, a constant, chilling companion, a silent observer of his every move. He never attempted astral projection again. The freedom he had once craved had become his eternal prison, a terrifying reminder that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. And sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, he still feels that cold, unseen presence, a chilling reminder of the uninvited passenger that now shares his life, a silent, hungry entity from the other side. Story 2. The Echoing Void. Dr. Aris Thorne, a brilliant but eccentric astrophysicist in his mid-50s, viewed astral projection not as a spiritual journey, but as a scientific frontier. He believed it was a means to explore the universe without the limitations of physical travel, a way to perceive dimensions beyond the conventional three. His sprawling, cluttered home laboratory, filled with blinking lights, humming machinery, and complex equations scrawled on whiteboards, was his temple. He'd spent years developing a unique method, combining ancient meditative practices with cutting-edge neurofeedback technology, convinced he could achieve a controlled, repeatable out-of-body experience. He sought not enlightenment, but data, proof of other realities. The clock on his main console glowed 3:13 a.m. His initial successes were groundbreaking. He charted subtle energy currents, observed distant celestial phenomena with an impossible clarity, and even claimed to have glimpsed nascent forms of life on exoplanets, all from the comfort of his laboratory. He meticulously documented every detail, every sensation, every observation. Convinced he was on the verge of a revolutionary discovery, his astral form, a shimmering, translucent replica of his physical self, moved with a speed and freedom that defied all known laws of physics. He felt a profound sense of intellectual triumph, a confirmation of his radical theories. One night, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Aris decided to push the boundaries further than ever before. He aimed to reach beyond the known universe, to pierce the veil of what he termed the cosmic background noise, the faint, almost imperceptible hum of reality itself. He adjusted his neurofeedback helmet, intensified the meditative frequencies, and launched himself into the void. He shot past galaxies, through nebulae, past the very edge of observable space, his consciousness expanding beyond anything he had ever conceived. The universe, usually so vast, now seemed like a mere speck in an infinite, echoing blackness. He found it, a place where the cosmic background noise ceased, where the hum of reality was replaced by an absolute, profound silence. It was a void, not of emptiness, but of an unimaginable, terrifying fullness. It was a place where light did not exist, where time had no meaning, where the very fabric of existence seemed to unravel. He felt a profound sense of awe, quickly replaced by an overwhelming terror. He was not alone. In the heart of this echoing void, something stirred. It was not a physical entity, but a vast, formless consciousness, an ancient, primordial intelligence that seemed to predate the universe itself. It was a presence that radiated an unimaginable cold, a hunger that transcended all known forms of life. Aris tried to retreat, to pull his astral form back towards the familiar warmth of his physical body, but he was caught. The void seemed to cling to him, to absorb his very essence. He felt a terrifying suction, as if his consciousness was being stretched, pulled apart, absorbed into the vast, formless entity. His silver cord, usually a vibrant, pulsating tether, began to fray, its shimmering threads dissolving into the echoing blackness. He could feel the ancient intelligence probing his mind, sifting through his memories, his knowledge, his very identity, consuming it all with an insatiable hunger. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He was trapped, a helpless morsel in the maw of an cosmic horror, just as his silver cord was about to snap. A sudden violent jolt ripped through him. He was back in his body, gasping for air, drenched in a cold sweat. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of his laboratory. He sat up, disoriented, the terrifying encounter still vivid in his mind. He tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a hallucination, a vivid dream brought on by sensory deprivation and extreme mental exertion. But the lingering cold in the room, the faint acrid smell of ozone, and the profound sense of violation told him otherwise. He was no longer alone. A part of that echoing void had followed him back. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his laboratory, surrounded by his instruments, but feeling utterly exposed. Every hum of his machinery, every distant creak of the house, sent shivers down his spine. He felt a presence in the room, a cold, unseen weight that seemed to press down on him, making it difficult to breathe. He could almost feel an unseen gaze on him, a malevolent curiosity that had followed him back from the void. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, the lingering effects of a terrifying journey, but the fear was too real, too visceral. His meticulously organized notes now seemed to mock him, filled with equations that felt meaningless in the face of what he had witnessed. Days turned into weeks. Aris stopped his experiments. He couldn't bring himself to even look at his neurofeedback helmet, but the presence remained. He would wake up in the middle of the night to the sensation of being watched. A cold spot in his laboratory, a faint high-pitched whine that seemed to echo from the corners of his mind. Objects would sometimes move, subtly, imperceptibly, a pen rolling off his desk, a book falling from a shelf, a complex circuit diagram inexplicably rearranged. He started to see fleeting shadows in his peripheral vision, quick, dark blurs that vanished when he turned to look directly at them. He felt constantly drained, perpetually exhausted, as if something was siphoning his intellectual energy, his very capacity for thought. One evening, as he was reviewing old research papers, he heard a faint, distorted hum right behind him, a sound that seemed to resonate within his very bones. "You sought me." He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. Nothing. But the air was thick with a palpable cold, and the acrid smell of ozone was overwhelming. He knew then that it wasn't just a lingering presence. It was something that had attached itself to him, a fragment of that ancient, cosmic intelligence. He tried everything: scientific counterfrequencies, energy shields, even consulting with a renowned parapsychologist who, after a single, terrifying session, declared Aris's case beyond her understanding, her face pale with a fear that mirrored his own. The parapsychologist's last words to him were chilling. "It's not just a spirit, doctor. It's a resonance, a piece of something that exists outside of our reality, and it's feeding on your mind." Aris's life became a waking nightmare. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, constantly on edge, waiting for the next manifestation. The shadows grew bolder, sometimes lingering for a second longer, revealing a hint of a form, a vast, swirling vortex of darkness with eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The hum in the whine became clearer, more insistent, sometimes forming coherent thoughts, alien concepts that burrowed into his brain, taunting him, reminding him of his hubris, of the cosmic door he had opened. He was a prisoner in his own mind, haunted by an entity he had unwittingly brought back from the echoing void. He eventually retreated from society, desperate for solitude, hoping to outrun the entity, but it followed him. It was a part of him. Now, a parasitic attachment that fed on his intellect, growing stronger with each passing day. He learned to live with it, a constant, chilling companion, a silent observer of his every thought. He never attempted astral projection again. The knowledge he had once craved had become his eternal torment, a terrifying reminder that some voids, once glimpsed, can never truly be forgotten. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars are hidden by clouds, he still feels that cold, unseen presence, a chilling reminder of the echoing void that now shares his consciousness, a silent, hungry entity from beyond the cosmos. Story 3. The Mirror's Gaze. Isabel, a struggling artist in her early 20s, lived in a cramped, bohemian studio apartment filled with canvases, paints, and the lingering scent of turpentine. She had stumbled upon astral projection through an old, leather-bound book she'd found in a dusty antique shop, a book filled with cryptic symbols and faded illustrations. Unlike Elias, who sought escape, or Aris, who sought knowledge, Isabel sought inspiration. She believed that by venturing beyond the physical, she could tap into a wellspring of creativity, a realm of pure artistic expression. Her most prized possession was a large, ornate antique mirror, a gift from her grandmother, which she used as a focal point for her meditative practices. The clock on her easel read 1:07 a.m. Her initial attempts were frustrating, filled with fleeting sensations and fragmented visions. But then, one night, as she gazed into the depths of the antique mirror, focusing on her reflection, she felt a profound shift. Her reflection seemed to shimmer, to become more vibrant, more alive than her physical self. With a jolt, she realized she was no longer looking at her reflection, but through it. She had stepped through the looking glass, into a mirrored reality, a world that was both familiar and terrifyingly alien. Her astral form, a perfect, ethereal copy of herself, stood before her, a shimmering, translucent figure. This mirrored realm was a distorted echo of her own. Buildings were slightly askew, colors were muted, and the air hummed with a strange, almost imperceptible vibration. The people she saw were like ghostly imprints, moving through their lives with a detached, dreamlike quality. She could observe them, unseen, unheard, a silent voyeur, in a world that was almost, but not quite, her own. She found a perverse beauty in this distorted reality, a new palette of emotions and forms that fueled her artistic imagination. She spent hours exploring, sketching the strange landscapes and the melancholic figures she encountered. Convinced she had found her muse, one evening, driven by a desire to capture the essence of this mirrored world, Isabel ventured deeper than ever before. She found herself in a mirrored version of her own apartment, identical in every detail, yet imbued with a chilling sense of emptiness. The air was heavy, stagnant, and a profound cold settled over her, a cold that seemed to penetrate her very essence. She saw it then, not a shadow, but a reflection, her own reflection, staring back at her from the antique mirror, but it was wrong, terribly wrong. The eyes were hollow, devoid of life, and a faint, malevolent smile played on its lips. It was her, yet it was not her, a grotesque parody of her own form. Her reflection began to move, independently of her own actions. It raised a hand, its fingers long and skeletal, and pressed them against the surface of the mirror, as if trying to break through. Isabel recoiled, a wave of primal terror washing over her. She tried to pull away, to snap back into her body, but she was trapped. The mirrored realm seemed to solidify around her, the air growing thick and viscous, holding her in place. Her silver cord, usually a vibrant, pulsating tether, began to stretch, thinning to an almost invisible thread. She could feel her reflection, her doppelganger, pulling at it, a cold, unseen force, attempting to sever her connection to the physical world. Panic, raw and absolute, seized her. She was trapped, a helpless spectator to her own impending doom. Just as her reflection's skeletal fingers seemed to brush against her silver cord, a sudden, violent jolt ripped through her. She was back in her body, gasping for air, drenched in a cold sweat. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of her apartment. She sat up, disoriented, the terrifying encounter still vivid in her mind. She tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a nightmare, a vivid hallucination brought on by exhaustion and overwork. But the lingering cold in the room, the faint, metallic smell of ozone, and the profound sense of violation told her otherwise. Her reflection, her doppelganger, was no longer confined to the mirrored realm. She spent the rest of the night huddled in her bed, eyes wide open, staring at the antique mirror. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, sent shivers down her spine. She felt a presence in the room, a cold, unseen weight that seemed to press down on her, making it difficult to breathe. She could almost feel an unseen gaze on her, a malevolent curiosity that had followed her back from the mirrored realm. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, the lingering effects of a terrifying dream, but the fear was too real, too visceral. The mirror, once a source of inspiration, was now a portal to her deepest fears. Days turned into weeks. Isabel stopped painting. She couldn't bring herself to even look at her canvases, but the presence remained. She would wake up in the middle of the night to the sensation of being watched. A cold spot in her room, a faint, echoing whisper that seemed to emanate from the mirror. Objects would sometimes move, subtly, imperceptibly, a brush falling from her easel, a paint tube rolling across the floor, a half-finished portrait inexplicably altered, its eyes now hollow and malevolent. She started to see fleeting glimpses of her reflection, not in the mirror, but in polished surfaces, in darkened windows, in the depths of her own eyes, a distorted, malevolent copy that vanished when she tried to focus on it. She felt constantly drained, perpetually exhausted, as if something was siphoning her creative energy, her very will to live. One evening, as she was trying to force herself to paint, she heard a faint, distorted whisper right behind her, a voice that was eerily similar to her own, yet filled with a chilling malice. "You opened the door." She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Nothing, but the air was thick with a palpable cold, and the metallic smell of ozone was overwhelming. She knew then that it wasn't just a lingering presence. It was her reflection, her doppelganger, a parasitic entity that had crossed over from the mirrored realm. She tried everything, covering the mirror, moving it, even trying to sell it, but no one would buy it. The entity was bound to her, a dark twin feeding on her fear. The whispers became clearer, more insistent, sometimes forming coherent sentences, taunting her, reminding her of her foolishness, of the door she had opened. It spoke of taking over her life, of replacing her, of living her dreams while she faded into oblivion. The glimpses of her malevolent reflection became more frequent, sometimes lingering for a second longer, revealing a gaunt, elongated figure with eyes that seemed to absorb all light, a perfect, horrifying copy of herself. She was a prisoner, in her own mind, haunted by an entity she had unwittingly brought back from the mirrored realm. Isabel eventually succumbed to the despair. Her art withered, her spirit faded, and she became a hollow shell of her former self. The entity, her doppelganger, grew stronger, feeding on her life force, slowly consuming her. She never attempted astral projection again. The inspiration she had once craved had become her eternal torment, a terrifying reminder that some reflections, once gazed upon too deeply, can gaze back and pull you into their own horrifying reality. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon casts long shadows, she still feels that cold, unseen presence, a chilling reminder of the mirror's gaze that now shares her existence. A silent, hungry entity from the other side,